Good afternoon, everyone. I am Matt Clark with Veritas CFO, and today I am lucky to have Russell McMurry, the Georgia Department of Transportation Commissioner, on our podcast. Russell, great to have you join me today. Really appreciate you taking the time to talk with me. How you doing today?
I'm doing well, Matt. Thank you for this opportunity to chat with you. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, well, certainly me too. And it's not every day I get to talk with a Georgian of the year. And congratulations on being named one of the most influential Georgians again. So how many years have you been on that list now?
This is probably four, maybe five. Thank you for that acknowledgement. It's truly an acknowledgement of the hard work of the men and women of GDOT who do such a great job. I'm just the person that sort of gets to be acknowledged for that. So thanks for that acknowledgement. And again, all the credit goes to the GDOT team and all our partners.
Yeah, well, yeah, I appreciate your modesty there. So we have a lot of interesting topics to talk about today related to transportation and trucking, and also a new DOT leader in Washington. But before we dig into those topics, can you give us a brief background of you and your experience?
Yeah, sure, Matt. You know, time goes by fast, and between my junior and senior year of college at Georgia Southern University, I did a summer job with Georgia DOT and really fell in love with it. In fact, I did a lot of paving and spreading of gravel through basically improving dirt roads through some rural parts of Northeast Georgia, and worked on a bridge and really enjoyed the bridge construction, working for GDOT, doing an inspection and sort of project management at that point, mainly inspection, but really loved it. And so when I graduated from school, I had several job opportunities, but decided that I would like to work with the Department of Transportation, and started in Athens, Georgia, your hometown,
Right.
and loved it there. Was there about 10 years and in construction, and then sort of managing that office of construction and maintenance. Served 4 counties right around Athens, and then had a lot of opportunity, moved up to Gainesville to our district office and continued in the construction role, and then moved into design, if you will, or what we call pre-construction, and ultimately became the district engineer there, and just really loved that job of the diversity of 21 counties in Northeast Georgia, everything from Spaghetti Junction to South Carolina and up to North Carolina pretty much was that boundary. So we're very, very diverse transportation challenges, from everything from mountains and you know, really rural rolling roads to the urban, you know, Gwinnett County, DeKalb County line. So a lot of opportunity there. And then ultimately we're able to move down to Atlanta and come back into design, and worked in design, and then moved into the director of engineering role, which is all the aspects it takes to deliver a project from concept to getting it out to construction. Became chief engineer after that, and really was enjoying that role when Governor Deal at the time asked if could I be the planning director, which plans and, you know, comes up with the projects of the future for the department. And I stepped into that role very, very briefly before being asked to serve as commissioner by our state transportation board back in 2015. So since 2015, I've been able to serve in that role and capacity, the honor of my lifetime to be able to serve Georgia in that capacity, and again work with so many great and talented people here at Georgia DOT. So yeah, that constitutes 30 years in June. So you know, it flies by.
Yeah, sure. And it certainly sounds like you got some hands-on experience if you were spreading paving on dirt roads, right?
Yes, indeed. This time of year, I think about our men and women out when we have snow and inclement weather, and
Right.
You'll appreciate this from being from Athens, but I've been in the back of a dump truck on 10 loop that was frozen up, and we couldn't spread the salt and sand because it had gotten so cold that it was frozen. So I sort of know what it is to do that work, and try not to forget the hard work that the men and women do at GDOT.
Right. Understood. So certainly going from those days of spreading gravel or spreading paving and salt and brine to your current role, So you moved into the political realm of your role, and what made you decide to move from your engineering days to cross over into politics? Did you have a calling for politics, or what made you decide to make that jump?
Well, I like to think of my job as not political, maybe quasi-political. And I had actually interview one time where the interviewer was somewhat hostile and just sort of claiming, well, your job's just political, it's just political. And my answer is yes, and it should be. And it just sort of threw that reporter back a little bit, because that wasn't the answer they were expecting. And the reason I say that is Georgia, as you know, is the largest state east of the Mississippi, 159 counties, 700 some odd cities. We have a representative form of government, be it local and state, and especially at the state level. For me to engage with local elected officials and state elected officials to understand what their transportation needs are in the situations that they face in their communities is the way we have to do it. Quite simply, we at GDOT can't be at all those places all the time to know what those needs are and to understand what's transpiring in transportation. So I look at it from that lens, that we have to engage with our state elected officials and local elected officials and really understand what's going on across Georgia. And I think, part of my experience starting in Athens and working with Athens, Clark County and Jackson County, Oconee and Walton counties back in those days, is you really have an appreciation of, sort of local rule, or home rule, as we like to, talk about in Georgia. So it's very important to have those relationships and understanding such that we can make the best decisions for Georgia. And so it's not that, every county and city's got their number one project, but we have to discern more globally of, okay, everybody's got their number one, but what are the things that truly drive Georgia forward? But we have to understand the whole mix, if you will, so we can make the very best decisions as it comes to Georgia. So, I look at it from that point of view. The days I do get to look at plans and engineering are great days. I love those days. And I've told a lot of people, I spend probably more time on budget and financing and funding than I do on engineering these days, trying to lead an agency. But that's what the job entails. I love every minute of it. And certainly want to make sure we're doing the best for Georgia. That's our goal.
Sure. Yeah, it's interesting concept about the trying to balance the local rule versus the goals of the state, and I'm sure you got a lot of competing stakeholders there to deal with, and I'm sure that's a challenge in of itself. So to dig more into the transportation and trucking issues, I know you were part of the Georgia Freight and Logistics Commission that was created by the Georgia General Assembly 2 years ago. Can you share some of the reasons that commission was created and some of the main issues that were researched and discussed?
Yeah, well, thanks, Matt, and obviously got to see you at many of those meetings as well. So thanks for being an active participant there. I think in hindsight, the wisdom of the legislature, the speaker and lieutenant governor at the time, to put this commission together through legislation is profound, especially today as we're living in the COVID world, and e-commerce has gone just ballistic, and the whole supply chain reoriented itself back in March or so when COVID started ramping up, and we saw the criticality of the freights and logistics industry across the board. And as you know, trucking plays a huge role in that, the biggest role. And so sort of going back to the beginning, it was just, again, forward leaning and looking out as how do we keep Georgia the number one place to do business, because we have so many great things going for us. As you know, we've got the ports, the seaports of Savannah and Brunswick, and we've got inland ports. We've got Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport. We've got a lot of good infrastructure, that really is desirable to, be a leader in freight and logistics. But we can't just be satisfied as a state. And I think I'm really sure that was sort of the look forward the legislature had, the General Assembly, was how do we not only maintain our great rankings, but how do we continue to be competitive going forward and even gain market share, if you will. So, that was sort of the creation, a lot of outcomes from that. And, one of the biggest ones we heard over and over was truck parking, and the electronic truck logs now, which have had a significant impact on truck parking across the state. Number one. Number two, just the increase in volume as well, has caused that to be an issue. So one of the takeaways from that report was for the commission's final report was for Georgia DOT to continue to study, or which we actively have a study underway, to look at truck parking sort of globally, and we heard, I believe, like some number about 23% of all private truck parkings comprised of three private entities. So, that's, we start seeing some data and parsing out data, and then looking at where warehouse distribution fulfillment centers are and what's the opportunity for truck parking around there. Those are some real big problems to solve. And those kind of things, we hear from locally as well as, there's so many trucks on our roads, but everybody's ordering online now to get deliveries on the front doorstep. So you gotta find that right balance. But the other outcomes we heard is one of increased rail capacity, trying to continue what we have with class ones, our 2 class ones, but also the short line rail, trying to make more investments there to serve industry, especially trying to be a catalyst of industry in rural and rural parts of the state in South Georgia, where we do have or short line railroads. And then we talked about one of the outcomes there was still education and outreach for getting more truck drivers into the industry and trying to make that point of entry a little easier. Very critical. And we've got a great technical college system of Georgia, of our technical colleges and universities. They do a great job in training workforce, but workforce development, whether it be for trucking or warehouse distribution, is still, a good thing that we need to continue to look at, continue to grow jobs. Those are good jobs. So, getting access to those are important. So, there was a litany of other things. Part of that was looking at expanding some scope of public-private partnerships for freight and logistics infrastructure investments, sort of in a non-traditional way. When we think about public-private partnerships in transportation, we pretty much think roads and bridges, but the commission's report was expansive to think about inland ports, truck parking, rail investment, things like that, again, to keep Georgia's competitive advantage. So, 2 years of work, very eye-opening. As you mentioned, as it was commissioned, though, had private industry at the table as well. Had some really good leaders from places like UPS and Home Depot and others, that are in the space of freight and logistics. So, very good outcome. I was very honored to be part of that commission, and certainly has given us a blueprint to drive forward on. And now GDOT, through our planning division, is underway with getting underway this year with our updated freight and logistics plan. So this data and information from that certainly will be foundational as we update and move forward with our next freight and logistics plan.
Right. Yeah, certainly a lot of topics that we could dig into there. Rail, the driver shortage, the 3 Ps, the public-private partnerships. But the truck parking you touched on, I read a recent report by ATRI that the average of the truck drivers spends an average of 56 minutes a day looking for truck parking, and certainly that cuts into the driver's hours of service time that could be certainly more well spent. You mentioned the GDOT study that you guys are digging into. What are your thoughts on timelines or kind of action plans coming out of that?
Yeah, that number of minutes spent searching is just critical. I mean, that's time not driving and not being productive. So I think our timeline is we still probably have about a year to complete the study, a lot of data. We've done a lot of the data gathering, also building upon the Atlanta Regional Commission's work here in Metro Atlanta for their trucks parking that they study they've done. So we're trying to aggregate that together. But, one of the things I'm sort of optimistic about is technology. How can we leverage technology to better inform drivers of where those opportunities exist, whether they're public or private? And again, I think there's an interesting space here too that's probably a public-private opportunity. Don't know exactly what that looks like yet, but again, as we talked about, on the commission too, is sort of public benefit, is if you can pass that bar of public benefit to use, public dollars that, maybe in a partnership with public-private, I think, that could be very advantageous, that we can capitalize on some opportunities. So there's a lot of things to look at. I mean, some other states have utilized parking along interchanges where there may be excess properties. That's sort of hard in Metro Atlanta. We've sort of expanded the transportation footprint. Everywhere there's an inch of property, we've just about used it. So, but those, there's a lot of things. I'd say probably a lot of tools in the toolbox that we will explore as we finish up that work over the next year.
Yeah, well, it's a good point about some of the interstate access. So, one thing, some of these, roadside areas that the state has had that have been closed down, and soon you could turn those over into truck parking. I think, is that on the plate to look at?
Indeed, and in fact, part of it is scrubbing the property we do own it, rest areas and welcome centers, or some of those old roadside pull-offs that existed that may not had any betterments, but just parking. But yeah, we're trying to look at that. I mean, we've already looked at a few places where we know that we have some additional property that you can just expand some of the existing property or existing parking within the footprint we already own. So all those things are on the table. Yeah.
Right. Understood. So along similar lines, and some of the Senate transportation committees I've attended, I've heard you talk about truck-only lanes, and ones I've heard about mainly between Macon and Atlanta on I-75. Can you talk about the status of those plans? When you think those lanes could be open or might be open, and are there other areas of the state that you're looking into for these truck-only lanes?
Yeah, thanks for that question. This is very innovative. And as we were looking and forecasting the need for capacity for traffic period on I-75, which was actually in our freight and logistics plan way back when, knowing that from Savannah to Atlanta, capacity improvements were going to be needed, we started thinking about, one, safety. And we always think about safety first. And when you look at the data on that stretch of 75 from 475 up into the south part of Henry County, you see a disproportionate number of fatality crashes with trucks as compared to crashes. So, the crash numbers percentage are pretty low, but the fatality numbers involved in commercial vehicles are very high. And so, that concerns us always, making sure that we have safe corridors for people to travel on. So we were looking at that as, okay, how do we continue to improve safety, knowing that we need to add capacity? And that section of 75 has truck volumes that are very high. I mean, they're among the highest in the state. The highest location of truck volumes, though, is actually 75 at 285, or at the top end of Atlanta. But that section of 75 is near those numbers. They're super high percentage, and along that corridor they vary, and they continue to build, obviously, from sort of south to north. So as we're looking at what's the solution for future capacity along a very busy corridor, and we look at the freight growth that we anticipate, even from Savannah and Florida, I-75 is the freight artery of the east of the Mississippi. It's not I-95, especially in this section, of the nation. It's I-75. So we started when those things collided, we said, well, let's separate the cars from the trucks. There's plenty of capacity for cars in the existing lanes, so we'll create new capacity, or 2 lanes, for the trucks, and separate them physically such that you don't have that friction of cars, cutting in front and cutting off drivers and the like. We also saw that as a competitive advantage for marketing from Savannah, that, as you know, truck haul from Savannah into Henry and Fulton County, you can make that turn in a day. Very competitive, again, helps our port. And then thirdly, we think it's a great opportunity for technology, is that as truck platooning becomes more and more the mainstay and having more connectivity among vehicles to infrastructure, you've got it in a situation where it's separated from the other cars. And so I think that'll give confidence to the user, the non-commercial vehicle user, that, okay, those trucks may be sort of platooning over there in the future, but at least I'm not driving next to them, you know. And so we see a lot of advantages there. This section really fit nice for solving those problems. That's not necessarily the solution everywhere, but we certainly will be continuing to look at those other opportunities as we have expansion along the interstates. And that interstate expansion still in other parts is still very much needed across the state and the nation.
Sure. Well, speaking of making more on a personal note here, I'll be glad when that I-75, I-16 interchange is finished up, driving down to St. Simon's. That's got to be probably one of the most congested, scariest intersections going through. But so you touched on the Port of Savannah too, and also mentioned some of these inland ports. So certainly the amount of freight coming through Savannah has increased over the last several years, and I think part of that is the creation of these inland ports too. I think the thought process was, again, from those trucks going from Savannah to Atlanta, take those off the road, put them on rail. Can you talk about GDOT's involvement with Port of Savannah and these inland ports?
Yeah, absolutely. And we have a great working relationship with the Georgia Ports Authority, and work closely together with them and meet routinely with them as they plan for port expansion and things like inland ports, which is advantageous to us. You know, a lot of freight, you know, the biggest share of it, I think the number was like 77 to 80% of the freight is trucks, but they're coming to Atlanta.
Right.
And so right now there's still advantageous of that freight coming on truck, but the longer haul gets on rail. And that's the advantage of some of the work we've partnered with the Ports Authority, their own property, with the Mason Mega Rail Yard, which is extending the sidings for both Class 1 operators. We funded a bridge to replace a bridge to basically give the room underneath for the rail yard to operate and span a canal. Finished that up last summer ahead of schedule, I might add, and again gives Georgia Ports Authority the ability to increase their rail capacity, which helps us because that gets some of that truck traffic, container traffic off the roads right there in Savannah and in around the port, which lessens the congestion in that area. And then that's, you know, those kind of containers are, you know, go much further distance. You know, they're going past Atlanta generally, further north and west as well. So, and the Ports Authority's got some great relationships up the eastern seaboard as well that they partner with. But Matt, you're right. You know, GPA's numbers continue to grow. Even last year during COVID, they grew by almost 2% of TEUs, which was amazing. I think like 4.68 million TEUs. Yeah. Well, a TEU is one of those 20-foot containers. That's a lot of trucks on the roadway. So again, our partnership with them through inland ports are critical. The inland port is usually a discussion with the rail, the local authority, if there's an authority, and GPA, and then we interface as well as, you know, other transportation investments that may need to happen. But you know, great partnership, strong partnership, and sort of like my intros, we're all trying to figure out how to do the best we can for Georgia collectively as the Ports Authority and Georgia DOT.
Right. Yeah, understood. So at the beginning, we talked about the new leader of the U.S. Department of Transportation, Secretary Buttigieg. Have you had a chance, had any interactions with him yet?
You know, I have not yet. I look forward to that opportunity. I am friends with former Indiana DOT Commissioner who who knows them well and work with them. And I'm excited to get engaged. It's been my experience working with elected officials who have been mayors, have really a good understanding of the complexity it takes to deliver projects and programs, and really sort of has that hands-on approach, which I always like. I mean, I like to dig in on issues and understand them, and help try to solve the problem. So my understanding is that's sort of his approach. So I look forward to that opportunity. I am also happy to note that the Federal Highway Administrator, or who's been nominated as a deputy administrator now and who will become administrator ultimately, is Stephanie Pollock, and she was my counterpart at Massachusetts DOT. So we've known each other for a number of years as well. So I'm glad to know we've got some connections there, and there's some other staff in and around USDOT and the modal agencies that I've had the opportunity to work with either directly or indirectly. So there's some connections there. So just look forward as they get sort of established and settled in, that we have some opportunity to work with each other.
Sure. Seemed like you had a pretty good relationship with Lane Chow. Reading some of the papers and news, you got a lot of good feedback from her. So hopefully your relationship with her will transfer over to Buttigieg too.
Certainly, Secretary Chow certainly was a great friend to Georgia DOT and to Georgia, and did some phenomenal things. And I don't want to build a relationship with the new secretary the way I did with her. It happened to be when the 85 bridge collapsed. She was just in that role for about 3 weeks when she gets a call that says, "Hey, you had a interstate bridge fall down." And it's like, okay, what do I do now? So anyway, that's how we got to know each other pretty intimately, very quickly, and neither by our choices. So, but it turned out to be a fantastic relationship, and appreciation, a mutual respect of each other, obviously, and looking forward again to continuing a strong relationship with USDOT. When it comes to transportation, it's not a party. It's not a party issue. Transportation transcends parties, and it's so important for the local economy, state economy, and national economy. So we look forward to working together on all the many things that are ahead of us in transportation.
Yeah, well, so speaking of parties and leaders in DC, what are your thoughts on this long-awaited infrastructure bill? Will it pass? And if it does, what impacts will it have on the state?
Yeah, well, let me tell you, federal transportation bills are extremely important. They're extremely important for this reason, is that it gives certainty for long-term planning and execution of projects. Most transportation bills are 5 years. That's sort of been the history. Now, it takes somewhere between 5 and 7 years to deliver a big transportation project, sort of national average. So you have to have confidence that the funding is going to be in place through these federal programs to advance projects of significant size, or even smaller projects for that matter. So what it does for states like Georgia is having a transportation bill in place that is multi-year and not just a one-year extension gives us certainty, and gives us the ability to plan better and execute better. Looking forward to seeing what comes forward, hearing some encouraging news that maybe reauthorization of the FAST Act happens this year. We'll see. Also talk of potential stimulus like we saw in R many years ago. So we're, any transportation investment or increased in transportation funding, we certainly will deploy and use wisely and make the most out of it for Georgia. That's for sure. And we'll see what the programs have. The federal transportation bills have a lot of nuances and a lot of programs. I think currently we've got 13 budget programs federally. So there's a lot of nuances in how you deliver projects. And so we'll look forward to see what those details are as they emerge.
Sure, yeah, understood. And talking about DC, what's next on your horizons? You've been at GDOT for 30 years. been the commissioner for going on 6 years. Any thoughts about moving up to DC anytime soon?
No, thank you. I like Georgia. Love this role. Don't plan to do anything different anytime soon. So we've got a great team here, and we're doing some big things in Georgia. I mean, just as we talked about with the Freight and Logistics Commission, is got work pivoting off there that's good for Georgia. We've got a lot of big things underway. The Major Mobility and Investment Program. We're moving Atlanta forward with express lanes and taking care of some of those freight bottlenecks like I-20 at 285 on the east side and west side of town, and down in Savannah at I-16 and I-95. I mean, it's exciting times to be in civil engineering, and I still claim to be a civil engineer first and foremost, and seeing projects and programs like that move forward is where I want to be, and I'll still want to be a part of those for a good long time.
Sure. Well, certainly we'll be glad, and the state will be glad to keep you in Georgia. That's for sure. So, Russell, this has been great. Really appreciate you taking your time today to share your thoughts. One last topic before we go, and you had touched on it. It's been almost 4 years from the I-85 bridge fire. I guess you remember that day vividly, and from what I recall, you were just getting home after the legislative session had ended, and we walked in the door and saw it on the news. And is that how it played out, or how did it happen?
Yeah, indeed, Matt. You've got a good memory there. I actually snuck home. It was sort of left a little after 5-ish or so, and it was sine die at the Capitol. So the legislature was still going, but everything was looking good for Georgia DOT. So I decided I'd head on home. I actually drove across that section of bridge on my way home, and as I walked in the door, the TV was on, and fire on the interstate, which, believe it or not, happens pretty frequently for car fires. So
Right.
That was my first thought. And then as I saw the flames and they had the helicopter shot, I realized it was much more significant. And sort of funny now, not at the time, was I didn't know you could get so many phone calls and text at one time. I literally could not hardly make a phone call or send a text because of incoming text. And so I had plenty of people letting me know there was sort of an issue going on. My wife actually came downstairs, and I'm, on the phone pointing at the TV, and she's looking at it. And I pretty much told her, I said, that bridge is about to collapse. I've got to go. Don't know when I'll be home. And turned around and headed back in. And I'll just tell you the teamwork of so many people, not only GDOT, but Atlanta Fire and Rescue, Atlanta PD, our heroes, Georgia State Patrol, Department of Public Service, everybody, in a first responder, reactionary, situation was, by the time I got to Atlanta, back to Atlanta, I talked on the phone the whole way, hands-free, by the way, all the way back, talking to our staff, our bridge inspectors, and everybody trying to triage the situation. When I got to our traffic management center, where we stood up emergency operations center, everybody was working their plan and coming up with response. It was just a thing of beauty, and and that just shows you the competence of all these agencies and especially our GDOT team on how to respond in those situations. So it was very surreal. It's hard to believe it's been as long as it's been now since it happened, and
Right.
But those days are pretty vivid, and just super proud of the outcome of so many people, including our contractors and suppliers, doing a great job of really around the clock to get it back open. It's significant when you've got 225,000 cars or so a day that can't use a piece of interstate. It has a big impact. So yeah, very surreal day. It's and in the weeks following, but I think a good outcome, better than we could all have hoped for, and but it was all teamwork that made it happen, no doubt about it.
Now, I read that Governor Deal gave you some negotiation strategies during that time.
Indeed. I give Governor Deal a lot of credit. We didn't. It wasn't as simple as just saying, okay, here's here's the old bridge plans, build that. The type of beams that were used on that bridge are no longer made. I mean, it's just the vintage of beams. And it's, as I told the governor, it's not like going to Home Depot and say, let me get some 2x4s. Every bridge beam was a unique length. So they had to be custom made. So it wasn't like you build one bridge beam and replicate it. Everything was a unique length. So as I presented the governor deal, how much we thought it was going to cost and how long it was going to take, he encouraged me to figure out if we could get the contractor to speed up. And my story is that I told the governor, I said, well, Governor, we're shrewd negotiators and we're only going to give them so much time, you know. And he said, well, I believe that, Russell, but find a way to make it faster. And so he did. He cleared the deck for us. We worked on an incentive, and the contractor will tell you that really did push them to 24 hours a day having that incentive on there, in which gave a tremendous outcome. So Governor gets the credit for that strategy. We're just glad we could deploy it and make it successful.
Sure. Well, you certainly handled the whole situation well. Looking back on it now, any learning lessons from it that you can share?
Lots of lessons learned, in fact, and a lot of things we've taken away from that. One of the things I'm most proud of is communications. Actually, is our strategic communications office and division working with the media and really in a proactive way and innovative ways of getting messages out, and just really focused on communications because it was so impactful for people and affecting people's livelihoods, in fact, in and around that area. So that was one of the things super proud of. We've figured out how to do some other things faster and better in projects, doing some prefab bridge pieces and connections that we did there, and that we had some more experience with. Again, lots of things. I probably could go on a very long time on those things, but it also goes back to partnerships and relationships, and relationship with MARTA, relationship with the city, State Patrol, all those people that it took to manage the site on a daily basis was very important. So lots of lessons to take away. We certainly try to deploy those going forward. Of course, everybody asks me, why can't I get my bridge built in a few weeks? Why does it take so long? But most people don't let us just shut down the road for a good long time and have at it either. So, not quite the same, but we certainly try to make them as fast as possible.
Yeah, understood. Well, Russell, thank you again very much for taking your time to talk with me today. Much appreciated.
My pleasure.
Great. And that wraps up our show for today. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Please let us know your comments and feedback in the comments box below, and make it a great day.